But what management or ownership doesn't understand is that these crises happen on social media. So they are foisting these interns and new grads in a position and in a place where they're working now, their ecosystem. Yes, it can be all great and posts and hashtags and emojis and reels, but it can get really bad really quick when people start complaining and some issue becomes polarizing. And then that social media manager needs to become a PR crisis manager quickly.
Welcome to the Smart Talk series, the show for professionals who want strategies, tips, and real talk about all things PR, marketing, and social media. Your host is Melissa Vella Williamson, an award-winning, accredited, and nationally recognized PR pro and communication thought leader. And now your host, Melissa Vella Williamson.
Hello and welcome to the Smart Talk series. I'm Melissa Vella Williamson. This season, our focus is on evolving your career. Today, I'm joined by Molly McPherson. Her experience in public affairs, emergency management, and the news media enables Molly to help clients prepare for and manage communication crises by creating an indestructible PR plan of action. Molly is a podcast host, best-selling author, and creator of a popular TikTok account that makes PR crises easy to follow and easy to avoid. Welcome, Molly.
Oh, Melissa, I'm so happy to speak with you again.
I'm so happy to talk with you, Molly. Tell us more about your background and what you're doing today.
You know, my background really matches my generation and my age. I tend to follow whatever the communication hot topic or hot medium is of that time. You know, my background, I grew up in a time before not only social media, but cable television. So I was drawn to the news, television news, when I went to graduate schools, when the internet started. So I certainly followed that as well as social media. And so my career working in Washington, followed, social media trends. And now that I'm back in New England, I'm working as a consultant. I work with clients, but also I like to follow trends, like you mentioned, on social media, including TikTok.
Yeah, I really loved it. I was telling someone just the other day, I was like, it's so brilliant how Molly intersects PR principles and crisis principles with pop culture, because pop culture just crosses every difference boundary we have as people, right? We're all kind of living in the same time frame. And so when something happens with like Beyonce, a lot of people will know about it. So
Yes. And it's also it's no coincidence either. It's what people are interested in.
yeah.
So I could talk about PR all day, but if no one cares about just PR alone, no one's necessarily going to follow or watch. But when you tie it into what people care about, popular culture, it tends to work.
Yeah. And I have to ask you, because this is something that I've thought about too, is do you ever worry that like one of the celebrities or influencers that you talk about, when there's that case study, it's going to come back to you, right? That's the part that kind of scares me a little bit about going there, but I love that you're so brave about it.
Yeah, I mean, I worry every single time I hit send on a post, what is going to be, what's going to be the feedback, but also what's going to be the blowback. I'm sure everybody, at least, I know in my generation, a lot of people who are on TikTok, particularly, we do it with nerves because it is stressful to have that happen. But in many cases, what I'm finding is when I highlight an issue or highlight people or trends or celebrities, I end up hearing from them either to hire me or they just thank me, for highlighting something about their piece of it, which has been surprising, but a nice part of it.
Wow. Okay, that's awesome. So no grumpy celebs have come after you with a letter of shut your mouth or just
No grumpy celebs, but certainly grumpy followers and fans of celebs, definitely.
Oh, yeah. Yeah. One of the shows I'm watching right now on Disney Plus is called The Muppets Mayhem. And that's a modern take of Dr. Teeth and that musical band that Animal who plays drums, right? On the Muppets. And anyway, during the show, all these Muppets get their hands on smartphones for the first time and get introduced to the internet by their producer. And soon enough, they find themselves in a Twitter feud with Beyonce's Beehive, Justin Bieber's fans, and the Taylor Swift Swifties. So I absolutely understand that you can get feedback or some of that clapback, as they say, from some of your pop culture fans. So, Molly, what inspired your career evolution from working at FEMA to becoming the industry TikTok star you are now?
That's so kind of you to put it that way. I mean, I wish I could sit here and say this was all by design. It's more reactionary. In 1999, I married someone in the military and I had to let go of my career. What I was pursuing at that time, believe it or not, was to be an FBI agent. And I was waiting on an application, but I got married and we moved. And I always needed to find jobs where we were transferred. So I almost fell into, positions that worked for me. So I guess it's more about my resiliency and following trends that has given me the career that I've had today. I support a lot of military spouses out there who have to do a lot of sacrifice. But one of the benefits of moving around is you're given, opportunities, and certainly working in Washington, D.C. was an opportunity for me that I took advantage of, and I've been reaping the rewards of it every day.
Yeah, absolutely. I love that ability that you're sharing is you have to move our we have to move our career with our life changes and just being open because that perspective that you have now, having been in these different places and roles, is super helpful. And it sounds like that through line has been crisis communications or being able to really address really tough topics in a smart way. So today, now that you're creating so much original content that's super valuable, how do you find the best ways to manage working as this thought leader when you couple that with the professional services you do for your clients?
Well, I am definitely at an intersection in my career right now where I have to make a choice. At the whole TikTok, the visibility factor that has increased so much, because of the social media app. One shows the absolute power of that app. But I have regular clients. I mean, I'm a consultant that is always working with clients. I have them on retainer. Sometimes I'll get called in to handle a crisis and, writing crisis plans. But also I've added in the last year, hourly consulting, and I get a lot of people who are going through like a social media crisis and having kids who are, graduated from high school. So I have been an incredibly busy person, definitely. And so my job right now is how to keep it all in check and really do what I love to do. And that is helping people. So whether it's on social media, whether it's on one, I'm probably leaning more towards, helping people who are going through a hot crisis right now, and I'll probably grow there.
Yeah, yeah, and I think that trying to really see ahead or around that corner and saying, you know what, I might have to make a decision or refine my model, my business model or my services model that way.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's a challenge for sure. And let's talk a little bit more about crisis communications because I'm sure all our listeners want your tips there. What are the fundamentals of that work that's really held up over the span of your career?
Well, Melissa, when you started the conversation about, my past, I mean, that's really where the crisis communicator in me is. And, there was a time when there were not many people who could actually say, hey, I'm a crisis communicator. And I only work in a crisis because there weren't a lot of organizations that were necessarily managing that unless you worked for, a firm or something that did that. But nowadays, anyone can get experience in crisis communication because of social media. I mean, you could be an intern handling a crisis at this point. So it is a universal skill now that a lot of people need to manage. And on the one hand, earlier in my career, it helped to be very, very specialized in what I did. And I was specializing on social media crises. I mean, I certainly had a say and a handle on that. But nowadays, I mean, everybody has experience in it. So that's why I want to kind of keep up with that and give people help and guidance and resources for managing things that can happen online.
Yeah, and so and I think that's what's really important to highlight is what I'm finding in this time of our lives is that the fundamentals that worked years ago are still very helpful today. Doing the right thing. And even if no one's looking, backing up what you say with real action, making things right when something goes south, and then not making that mistake again. And sometimes it's funny to me that there's clients that say, well, yeah, we knew that, right? Or I'm not surprised by any of these findings or your recommendations. Well, no, but a lot of times people need those reminders. Do you see that in your work?
Oh, Melissa, you bring up an excellent point. Social media and digital media complicates things, and
Yeah.
clients many times they're nervous about it. There's a fear-based type of thinking behind it. They don't understand necessarily all of it. But my principles in my communication and crisis communication in particular are just like yours. It's living by the golden rule. It's also just doing the right thing. It's having values. It's having a mission statement. It's having value statement, having principles. If you live by that, and if you promote that, and if you communicate and message that, it makes a crisis a lot easier to manage.
Yes, absolutely. And I think that more and more, as more chaos seems to be swirling around us because of how fast everything is, those tried and true steady principles are what we should look to for sure. Well, Molly, TikTok really seems like a wonderful place to connect with people in some ways, but it's also an environment where it's really easy to create our own issues or bring headaches to brand managers who are trying to do something, fun and simple and becomes one of the challenges. Like McDonald's had the Grimace milkshake come out for the Grimace birthday. And of course, the Generation Alpha and the younger kids are like, who's Grimace, right? And who's this character from McDonald's? But the Grimace milkshake challenge became something McDonald's had to address, right? So, what really inspires you to engage on that network when we have that really polar opposite and duality in that environment?
You mentioned the grimace trend. I find that fascinating about how that spilled out. I mean, certainly McDonald's, planned to resurrect Grimace. I'm a Gen Xer. Grimace was a sweet, lovable character back from my McDonald days. We loved Grimace and we loved having, characters come back, but that they took a spin on it and did, the Happy Birthday Grimace. But really, it was the TikTok generation, was the millennials, or I mean, Gen Z
Yeah.
that took a hold of it. And they're the ones who really created that almost a dark turn of it. And
Yeah.
McDonald's, the brand managers have come out and admitted that. And they just let it roll. I mean, they were nervous about it at first, but they said, no, let's just watch and see what happens. What happens is when people and ideas and groups and demographics and psychographics, when they grab a hold of something in the right way, it can be phenomenal. Like you
Yeah.
can't even pay for that type of publicity, but the opposite can happen as well.
Hi, this is Anais Vieta Miracle, a proud supporter of the Smart Talk series. As a sponsor, I would like to share a few organizations I support, and they include Southwest Key Programs, the Hispanic Women's Network of Texas, Fierce Mujeres, and the Hispanic Public Relations Association, HPRA, the Texas chapter. Please find out more information about these organizations in the show notes. And thank you to Melissa Vela Williamson, a steadfast leader in the space of Hispanic public relations and public relations overall. And thank you for all that you do for Latinas like myself in public relations.
Yeah. And I know that I saw online too, people are like, you can't even get the shake. It's like sold out. So
Yeah.
product wise, sales wise, that worked. And, I think in terms of the character, that if you put a PR point of view on it, well, they should have given us a little more of that origin story, the backstory. But I love how they kind of move with that and said, you know what? They made a little joke and we're going to let you all have fun with that. Because
Yes.
was it really harming anyone? Not really, right? But when you have situations like the Tide Pods for the little pods of detergent for laundry, and then people are trying different challenges and put them in their mouths and whatnot, well, then you really have to address those changes. But monitoring TikTok should be a very important part of all brand managers' work. Would you agree?
Oh, certainly. And, even with McDonald's, even though it was a wild success for them, all it, it's just one 18-year-old doing a grimace trend that gets hurt or killed, it would have been a disaster.
Yeah.
So anything, it can change on a dime, at any moment. So I think, safe is good. Safe keeps you safe, but safe doesn't go viral many times.
Yeah.
So sometimes you can hit it right and sometimes not. It's just so unpredictable.
Yeah, absolutely. Disclaimer, please drink this milkshake safely.
Yes, exactly.
That's hilarious. Well, Molly, what advice do you have for PR or communication professionals who might be interested in evolving their career a little bit?
I receive so many messages from people, from students, from current students, post grad, people even well into their career. They want to move into crisis communication work. They find it interesting. And certainly on TikTok, people can make it seem interesting. But the truth is, when I was deep into it, when I was working for FEMA, when I was working for the cruise lines, when you are there taking the calls, reading the emails, managing it, it is not a 9 to 5 job. It is not something that you can just, breeze through. It is a lot of work and a lot of time. But what I do mention to them is, like I mentioned at the beginning, of our talk here, any job can fall into crisis management. All it takes is one post or, one tweet that goes sideways or one incident that ends up online. And really anyone can do that type of crisis management work.
Yeah, absolutely. I would underline what you're saying because I see it and hear it all the time that you kind of start in your careers as a generalist, you're learning everything about your area of communication. And then over time, you might find that you perform very well in one discipline or you really love another. But crisis communication has become a necessary requirement, being prepared for an issue. And in the best of scenarios, you're thinking proactively, you have a plan in place. And what I find really helpful is when you've done a what if type exercise. That's what I take my clients through. Like, well, let's talk about all the ugly and scary and unthinkable things that could possibly happen to your organization or have happened that you don't want to talk about. Let's lay them on the table so that we can write some tailorable statements that we're ready to go because I've been in those situations like you're saying, Molly. And sometimes it's just super stressful and you can't believe what someone did or didn't do that caused this problem. Or it could be life and death and that you're addressing as a communicator. And at that moment, trying to put together the right words that calm down people in the situation that, empathize with others, that affirm what your organization cares about and helps show your efforts while legally being concerned about what terms you're using and words you're using. Human resource wise, right? HR wise, you're worried about those kind of things too. And then from the public PR perspective as well. So that's a ton of pressure. And so I really find planning through those scenarios in advance, putting together some statements that you can update with different dates and names and whatnot is helpful because in that moment, and I've had that moment literally where people are looking over my shoulders and I'm trying to write a quick statement and the client's looking at you and all of a sudden the computer, is not working great. Like that's a lot. So being proactive and planful is helpful. But what I kind of see, particularly from college students and, newer professionals that they're like, well, I want to do social media, but I really care about work-life balance and boundaries. And here's what I want to do. And sometimes I have to explain because of your point, Molly. Well, when you add in that every social media tool is pretty much a broadcast tool, right? And not everyone treats them with that type of respect that what you post online, you might as well say it on the news. It's out there. That the boundaries kind of go out the window sometimes when you're doing that work. And whether or not you're saying, I'm a crisis communication specialist, or you're a brand new PR coordinator, social media coordinator, all eyes will turn on you because it's, well, what's the communication strategy and what are we going to say and do? And so, what are your thoughts on that? Do you see people be surprised at the beginning of their careers or different parts that how much they need to prepare for this?
Preparing for a job in public relations.
Well, preparing for the fact that you can't keep these jobs in a nice, neat 9 to 5 box because at any time an issue happens, and no matter what level you're at the organization, it becomes part of your day.
Yeah, and I would say even from a broader look at it, I mean, coming out of the pandemic, I think newer generations are accustomed to having just more flexibility in general, no matter what the industry or sector that they're working in. And that's something that employers are going to need to understand. For public relations, however, because so often it can be a 24/7 job, particularly when you need to react to something. I think the signals that the younger generations, the people coming up who have more flexibility and have that more of a flex mindset, and they're very comfortable online, they're digital natives, it might be a perfect fit for them to be able to, plug in when they need to and then plug out when they don't, because a crisis is 24/7. But, we used to be in a 9 to 5 world. I mean, now that people want that flexibility, actually it could be a perfect industry for them to get into.
Yeah, and I think that if they have that openness of not every day in this work, by all means, not every day in this work is the same. But particularly what I'm seeing is those who want to focus on social media are not thinking about the PR aspect of that work. They're not thinking about the crisis calm aspect of that work. And I don't know if that's not being taught, but
Oh,
I
well,
see that too.
what I would say, what I find with all my clients, it's that they might not be thinking it, but they are being employed just to do social media. But what management or ownership doesn't understand is that these crises happen on social media. So they are foisting these interns and new grads in a position and in a place where they're working now, their ecosystem. Yes, it can be all great and posts and hashtags and emojis and reels, but it can get really bad really quick when people start complaining, and some issue becomes polarizing. And then that social media manager needs to become a PR crisis manager quickly.
Exactly. And, I see that all too often is that organizations of all sizes, I think the larger ones have definitely gotten a lot better. They've seen enough case studies and been through enough situations where they have someone with more experience and perhaps that PR, at least point of view, managing the channels, looking at copy before it goes out, right? But I see often the smaller organizations or nonprofits or the business owners, micro business owners, they're like, well, let me just get an intern, or I'm going to hand the keys off to a work study or a brand new employee. You're young, social, right? You know the
Yeah.
TikTok, go ahead and do it. And it's not fair. Just quite frankly, it's not fair to the newer professional to have that kind of responsibility without the mentorship and guidance. So thank you for what you do in your space that they can get tips from you online and you can scale that mentoring for them because whew, it's a whole lot. Well, Molly, I like to ask all my guests this because I'm really intrigued by the types of conversations and communication we have as professionals and individuals. But what is this concept of smart talk? What does that mean to you?
Well, I'm real big on alliteration as Molly McPherson. So smart talk to me is one, safe talk. It is speaking in a way that you do not inflame or create a controversy or a problem. But everything in my business and in my life too comes down to trust. If you are speaking and messaging and doing work in a way that either, maintains trust or gains trust in your customers and your stakeholders, then you are managing in a time that is needed. People need to trust you in a time when so many people have lost it.
Yeah, absolutely. And I'll say trust is built. I mean, you'll hear this again and again, but again, the fundamentals, people, the fundamentals of our work, it really matters is that we know it takes a while to build trust, but so quickly it can be torn down. And to repair that is a whole other ball game. So I love what you're saying there. That's absolutely smart. Molly, I know you're busy. You probably have a crisis to go handle. Tell us, what's the best way for our listeners to connect with you?
Well, certainly across all my socials, I have a link to my link tree, which connects with everything. But Melissa, one of the things that I have transitioned to now that I really like, there's a new platform out there called Five, and it's a Five platform where it's more for experts and people who are sharing information. So I'm encouraging everyone to visit me there. It's five.me/Molly McPherson. And that's where, I do post and I do put videos on there as well. But why I love this site is people can ask questions. And I can't answer everyone on TikTok and a lot of my social medias. It's really difficult, but that's where I'm going. So, and it is free. There are certainly paid levels, where I can offer more resources, but it is free to sign up and ask a question. And that's where I would love to send people because I love to share. And like you, we are always putting ourselves out there to help people in the passion in the areas that we work in. I mean, you are such a pro in the multicultural space, which is so important,
Yeah.
in today's language, whether it's digital or social or messaging, whatever it is. But people do need education on it. So it's people like you too that are, sharing that knowledge. And that's what I want to do for my followers as well.
Fabulous. I'm going to check that out. I hadn't heard about that, but just like you, Molly, to tell us what's on trend. So I love it.
You're welcome.
Awesome. Well, thank you, Molly, for sharing your knowledge and your stories with us today. We really appreciate it.
Oh, it was my pleasure. Great speaking with you again.
Thanks to our listeners for joining me for today's episode. We love diving deep into communication topics to elevate our industry practice. You can work with me as a trainer, consultant, or hire my firm, MVW Communications, for strategic planning or PR strategy services. In case you missed it, Smart Talk, Public Relations Essentials All Pros Should Know is out. You can buy your print or audiobook copy to get award-winning advice, lessons, and tools about all things public relations. Available on Amazon or get an autographed copy at mvw360.com/book. Grab your copy there and please leave us a review. It would mean the world to me and helps more aspiring or working professionals find us. And as always, think smart and communicate smart. And I'll see you next time.
Thank you for joining us for another episode of the Smart Talk series. If you learned something or enjoyed our conversation, share it on social media or send to a friend. To learn more about this and other communication topics, visit mvw360.com. That's mvw360.com.